Diana Mitchell sat by the wide bay window of her Chicago home, her hands folded neatly in her lap, though the fingers trembled ever so slightly. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the hardwood floor, spilling over the edges of the Persian rug, touching the arm of the leather chair where she had been sitting for hours. She hadn't moved, except to draw in a breath that felt heavier than the last. There was no sound of footsteps upstairs, no clink of glasses in the kitchen, no voice, deep and reassuring, filling the silence. The house had been emptied not by accident, but by truth, and the truth sat heavier on her chest than loneliness ever had. On the mantel stood a photograph in a polished silver frame. It captured a moment just a year before. Her smile radiant, his arm around her shoulders, his face turned toward her with the warmth of someone who seemed to belong. Jason Reed, 28. A man she had once believed loved her beyond measure. A man she had once dared to call her second chance at happiness. Now his absence screamed louder than any betrayal spoken aloud. Her phone lay dark on the small side table. She had not turned it face down, she had not silenced the ringer. There was simply nothing to hear. No message, no apology, not even the courtesy of a lie. Her heart ached with questions, but none pressed harder than one. How had I not seen? Diana Mitchell pressed her lips together, her eyes lowering toward her lap. She had carried a company, raised children, faced boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her. She had faced all of that with clarity. But in love, she'd been blind. The silence did not answer, it only deepened. And in that silence, her mind slipped back to where it had begun. Not in chaos, not in betrayal, but in the quiet promise of possibility. Before Jason Reed entered her life, Diana Mitchell's world was defined by order, achievement, and solitude. At 61, she was the CEO of a respected financial firm in downtown Chicago. The glass walls of her corner office overlooked the lake, the skyline stretching far into the horizon. To outsiders, she embodied success. She was the woman who had climbed further, worked harder, and endured longer than anyone expected. Her days were filled with meetings, contracts, strategy sessions. Her evenings were marked by the quiet hum of the elevator, carrying her home to an apartment too large for one. The stillness of those nights pressed in like a weight she could not ignore. Her children, grown now, lived scattered lives. Her daughter in California, raising a family of her own. Her son in Boston, forever busy, forever just out of reach. They loved her, she knew, but their visits were brief, their phone calls rushed. Her husband had been gone for more than a decade, claimed by an illness that no wealth, no influence could stop. She had mourned, then pressed forward, throwing herself deeper into work, convincing herself that success was enough. But sometimes, in the dim light of her kitchen, when she stood at the counter with a cup of tea, she admitted what she never confessed to anyone else. She was lonely. There were moments, small but piercing, that reminded her of what was missing. The sight of an older couple holding hands at the park, the sound of laughter carried from a restaurant as she walked to her car. The way silence seemed to echo too loudly in a home meant for more than one. Diana Mitchell had told herself that love was for the young, that at her age, companionship was an indulgence she could no longer expect. She had built walls to protect herself, strong walls, necessary walls. But walls, no matter how carefully constructed, could crumble. And they began to shift the night she met Jason Reed. The evening of the gala had begun like so many before it. Another event on her calendar, another obligation she could not refuse. The charity, one she supported for years, hosted an annual fundraiser at the Art Institute of Chicago. A night of polished gowns, carefully chosen ties, champagne glasses lifted in practiced rhythm. Diana attended out of duty. She had long grown weary of the hollow conversations, the endless parade of introductions that carried no weight beyond the evening. Her smile was polite, her presence expected. She stood before a painting, an oil canvas she had seen countless times, when a voice spoke beside her. "You know," he said softly, "the brush strokes don't just capture the light, they catch the loneliness too." Diana turned, surprised. He was young, much younger than the usual faces that drifted through these rooms. His suit was simple but well-fitted, his eyes bright with a kind of curiosity rarely found in men his age. "Jason Reed," he introduced himself, offering a hand. His grip was firm, his manner easy. They spoke first of the art, then of literature, then of the city itself. She found herself laughing, something she had not done easily in years. His words carried thought, not rehearsed lines. He listened. He asked questions. And most disarming of all, he seemed genuinely interested. When the evening ended, he asked if he might call her. Her instinct whispered caution, but her heart, long dormant, long waiting, pushed her to say yes. As she left the gala that night, the city lights glittered against the pavement. For the first time in years, Diana Mitchell felt as though the world might still hold surprises, and Jason Reed would prove to be the greatest surprise of all. It did not take long for whispers to follow them. At first, Diana and Jason's connection unfolded quietly. A dinner here, a long walk along the lake there, conversations that stretched until dawn. She felt alive again, alive in ways she had not since her 20s. His presence made her laugh, made her dream, made her feel less like a CEO and more like a woman rediscovering her heart. But Chicago was a city of eyes, and her world was a world of scrutiny. In the boardroom, glances lingered longer than usual. Subtle smiles carried sharper edges. At company functions, she heard the whispers just beneath the surface. Isn't he too young? What could he possibly see in her? At home, the unease was closer to the bone. Her daughter, visiting from California, asked gently, "Mom, are you sure about him?" Her son, less subtle, said outright, "He's half your age. What's he really after?" Diana defended Jason with the quiet dignity she carried everywhere. She reminded herself and others that love was not bound by numbers. And when Jason looked at her across a crowded room, when he called her, "my future," the doubts seemed to fade. Still, when the house was dark, when the night pressed in, those questions lingered. Could it be true? Could a man so young truly love her for herself alone? She pushed the thoughts away. She wanted to believe, needed to believe. But belief and truth are not always the same, and one careless word would soon make that painfully clear. To anyone watching from the outside, Jason Reed seemed devoted beyond question. He remembered the smallest details, the way Diana Mitchell preferred her coffee black, but only if it was French roast. The fact that she loved old jazz records, the kind where the crackle of the vinyl softened the horns. He knew when to draw her into conversation and when to let silence sit between them like an old friend. He called her late at night, not with empty words, but with stories of his day, his ambitions, his childhood, his dreams of building something lasting. He painted pictures of the future with brushstrokes so vivid she almost believed she could step into them. On quiet Sundays, he would arrive at her home with fresh flowers, not roses, but lilies, because she had once told him they reminded her of her mother's garden. He would cook dinner with her in the kitchen, humming softly as he worked. When she asked him why he chose her, his answer never wavered. "Because you see me. Not for what I have or what I don't, but for who I am." Those words undid her. For the first time in years, Diana Mitchell allowed herself to believe she could have something more than respect, more than titles, more than the hollow admiration of strangers. With Jason by her side, she felt not 61, but timeless. And when she whispered back, calling him "my future," it was not spoken lightly. It was said from a place deep within her, a place she thought had long ago turned to stone. She wanted to believe, and so she did. What she did not see, what she could not allow herself to see, was the flicker in his eyes when her words wrapped around him. A flicker that was not love alone, but calculation. It happened on an ordinary evening. They were sitting together on her balcony. The city stretched wide and glittering below them. Jason Reed had poured the wine, his laughter soft, his words easy. They were speaking of the future, of travel, of places they had never seen but dreamed of exploring. Diana Mitchell listened, her heart warm, her guard lowered. She had begun to think that perhaps she had been wrong to doubt. Then, casually, too casually, he said it. "You're my jackpot, Diana." The words were followed by a laugh, light and careless, as though it were nothing more than a joke. He lifted his glass, clinking it gently against hers. His smile remained steady, but for Diana, the air shifted. She smiled back, yes, she even laughed softly, as though it were harmless. But inside, something tightened. Jackpot. The word did not belong in a love story. It belonged in a casino, in a gamble, in the chance of winning something that was never truly yours. She tried to dismiss it. Perhaps he meant she was his fortune in love. Perhaps he had chosen the wrong word. Words slipped, after all. People said things they did not mean all the time. And yet, the sound of it lingered long after the glasses were empty. That night, as she lay awake beside him, her mind replayed it again and again. Jackpot. Not partner. Not forever. Jackpot. It was a seed planted in the soil of her heart. And though she tried to bury it, it had already begun to grow. After that night, Diana noticed things she had not allowed herself to see before. Jason's tastes grew sharper, more polished. The simple dinners he once praised gave way to reservations at restaurants where the wine list stretched for pages. The quiet gifts, flowers, books, notes, shifted into larger gestures, watches and tailored suits that seemed too expensive for a man just starting his career. He began to speak of business ventures, of opportunities that required investments. Not large at first, just enough to plant the thought. If we partnered on this, Diana, it could be something incredible. At first, she brushed it aside. But when she hesitated, his disappointment showed, not in anger, but in silence, in distance. There were calls he took in another room, voices she did not recognize. There were nights he returned later than promised, explanations brief, his smile stretched thin. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the devotion, the tenderness was not laced with motive. But the cracks in the glass were widening, and no matter how she turned her eyes away, the light caught them. Still, when he looked at her with those earnest eyes, when he spoke of a future where it was only them, she silenced her doubts. Love, she told herself, required trust, and she had chosen to trust. But the truth has a way of seeping through, no matter how strong the walls built around it. The confrontation came sooner than she expected. Her daughter sat across from her in the living room, hands folded tight, eyes filled with worry. "Mom," she said gently, "I know you don't want to hear this, but Jason isn't what he seems." Her son was less restrained. "He's half your age, Mom. Half. Do you really think this is about love? He's looking at what you have, not who you are." Their words pierced, not because they were harsh, but because they echoed the doubts she had buried. Diana Mitchell defended Jason, her voice steady but her heart unsettled. She spoke of his kindness, his loyalty, his devotion. She told them they did not understand what it meant to find love later in life, to find companionship where there had been loneliness. But when the conversation ended and the house grew quiet again, their words lingered like shadows against the walls. At work, the board's whispers grew bolder. She overheard a director mutter, "He's not after her heart. He's after her chair." The judgment closed in from every side. And yet when Jason Reed held her hand, when he told her not to listen to the world, that it was only them, she wanted to believe him more than she wanted to believe anyone else. But belief could not silence the unease. It only delayed it. And soon, the truth would come crashing through, leaving no room for doubt. It came not in a thunderclap, but in a whisper. Diana Mitchell had returned home earlier than expected. A board meeting was canceled, and for once, she allowed herself the indulgence of leaving the office before dark. She walked into her home quietly, the way she always did, pausing to set her keys in the small dish by the door. Jason Reed's voice carried faintly from the den. She almost called out to him, but something, some instinct, held her still. He was on the phone. His words were low, but the edge in his tone was unmistakable. "Of course she's my jackpot. Do you know who she is? The kind of money she controls? Just a little longer. I've got her right where I need her." The word struck harder than any shouted accusation could have. Diana stood frozen, the air thick around her, her breath shallow. For a moment, she wondered if she had misheard, if perhaps she had twisted his words in her mind. But as he laughed softly into the phone, she knew. She knew the truth she had been pushing away. She stepped back quietly, her hand pressed against the wall for support. The weight of betrayal settled like stone in her chest. Every doubt, every whisper, every glance she had brushed aside, they were all right. Jason emerged moments later, unaware she had heard. He smiled, kissed her cheek, asked about her day. And she too, stunned to confront him, yet simply nodded, her heart breaking quietly inside her. That night, she lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing. The man she thought had saved her from loneliness had instead built his life on her trust. The revelation was not loud. It was quiet, crushing, and it was undeniable. The confrontation could not be avoided. Days passed in a blur of silence and forced smiles until finally Diana Mitchell gathered her strength. She waited until dinner, until the house was still and the table set, the candles casting soft light across the room. When Jason Reed reached for her hand, she pulled it back. Slowly, deliberately. "I heard you," she said softly. Her voice carried no anger, only the calm weight of truth. "I heard you call me your jackpot." His expression shifted, surprise flashing before he masked it with a smile. "Diana, it was a joke. Don't." Her voice remained steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. "I've lived too long, survived too much, to mistake mockery for love. Tell me the truth, Jason. Was it ever real? For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then his smile faded, and something sharper replaced it. "You wouldn't understand," he said finally. "You've had everything handed to you: power, money, respect. People like me, we don't get chances unless we take them." Her breath caught, not because of the cruelty, but because of the honesty beneath it. "So I was never your future," she whispered. "Just your ticket." Jason leaned back, unapologetic. "You were both, and maybe that should have been enough." Diana stood then, pushing the chair back slowly, her heart heavy but her resolve steady. She had faced boardrooms filled with ruthless men, but this betrayal cut deeper than any of them ever could. The showdown ended not with shouting, but with silence, with the quiet end of something she had once believed was love. In the days that followed, the house felt emptier than ever. Jason Reed was gone. His clothes, his laughter, his carefully crafted devotion, all of it vanished as quickly as it had arrived. Diana Mitchell walked through the rooms slowly, as though reacquainting herself with her own home. Every corner carried memory, but memory was not enough to break her. Her children came, offering comfort wrapped in worry. "We tried to tell you," her son said softly, "but we never wanted you hurt." Her daughter held her hand longer than usual, whispering, "You're stronger than this, Mom." At work, the whispers shifted, no longer about scandal, but about survival. Some expected her to falter, to stumble beneath the weight of humiliation, but she did not. She arrived each morning, shoulders straight, her voice calm. Behind closed doors, though, she allowed herself to grieve, not just for the love she thought she had found, but for the version of herself that had dared to hope. Yet slowly, piece by piece, she began to reclaim her strength. She returned to her music, to her books, to the quiet rituals that had carried her long before Jason. She did not erase him. She did not pretend it hadn't happened. But she refused to let betrayal define the final chapters of her story. Life had taught her many lessons. This one, though painful, was simply another. And with each passing day, the ache gave way to something steadier: dignity. The seasons turned, and with them, so did the rhythm of her life. On a quiet autumn morning, Diana Mitchell sat once more by the window, a cup of tea warming her hands. The leaves outside had begun to fall, their colors rich against the gray sky. The house was still, but the stillness no longer crushed her. It carried peace instead. She thought of Jason Reed, not with longing, but with clarity. He had entered her life like a spark, but sparks were never meant to last. They burned, they dazzled, and then they faded. What remained was not bitterness, but a deeper understanding of herself. She had loved, she had been betrayed, but she had also survived. Love or money? In the end, she realized the answer was neither. The real lesson was dignity. The quiet, unshakable dignity of knowing who she was and what she would never again allow herself to be. She rose, set her cup down, and walked through her home with steady steps. The silence followed, but this time it felt like an old friend. Her story had not ended. It had only changed course, and for the first time in a long time, Diana Mitchell felt free. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Diana Mitchell's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Diana Mitchell's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next.